Are you underestimating your ability to change and transform yourself? And are you underestimating the ability of the organization to change its belief systems and its behaviors and what it's truly capable of?
Well, you've got to step back and say, okay, look at these 9 areas, and where is it going to have an impact of any negative impact on any of these areas? Or do we need to make some adjustments in these areas to allow that to happen at the optimum?
So I'm challenging all of us to find a way to be more profitable.
They've got ownership of it, they believe in it, and the change management piece will be so much easier.
And I would say Southwest, more than most airlines, truly understood a lot of its value. And it also understood how it could deliver very low-cost tickets.
Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. I'm Tony Lockwood, your host, and today we have a great show for you. But before I introduce my guest, I'd like to introduce you to a resource that you'll just have to get your hands on. Whether you're a senior executive steering complex transformations or a mid-level manager looking to make a significant impact, the Transformation Leaders body of knowledge is your go-to guide. This comprehensive resource covers best practices, strategies, and tools that will help you navigate change management challenges and drive successful outcomes in your organization. Grab a copy and let me know what you think. Today's guest. Hello, David. Welcome to the Transformation Leaders Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. We start these episodes in the same way, each one, by asking you just to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, your background, what you've been involved in, but more importantly, how did you get first involved in organizational change and transformation?
Hi, everyone. I'm Coach David J. Greer, and I'm a 45-plus year entrepreneur and a business coach and facilitator. When I was still at university getting my computer science degree, I joined a young software startup as the first employee after the founders. And I liked the place and stayed 20 years and eventually became co-owner. And so a lot of my experience in transformation and change is leading that company. Robel was the name. It was named for the two founders, Robert and Annabelle, a concatenation of their name. And obviously, especially in high tech, the pace of change and the change in the technology that you're working with, like you can't stand still or you'll go out of business. Like it's your market, what you're doing forces you to be constantly doing that. And then in addition, we were growing a company at a very fast pace. So we had to figure out, how are we going to grow this business and not blow it up? And how are we going to look after our customers? Another woman was hired, Carrie Lathwell, was hired the same month as me. And Bob and Annabelle and Carrie and we were the business for the first, from that point for 5 years. And we grew probably 20 to 25% top line revenue growth per year. And the only way we could do that is we kept transforming. Like, for example, my former partner, Bob, and we would actually engineer out client questions, like client tech support calls. We'd we've had in the last 2 months this same call. Like, how could we change the product so it just never came up? And we also transformed, how we did administration and simplified things so that we could sustain a level of growth with only 4 employees. And so again, every year there was stuff that changed. And then there was a transformation when we added our first new tech support person, and then we continued to add employees and grow the business till eventually we had 20 employees.
How many did you say?
20 employees in the end. So, still a relatively small organization, especially compared, I think, to who, a lot of your listeners and to the work that you do. But on the other hand, the software that we were selling was being sold to major divisions, including Fortune 500 divisions, that were then going to implement and create change for thousands and thousands of users. So we were always involved with the IT people to enable the change that they were bringing to the table by purchasing and implementing our software. So there was that aspect as well.
And when did you leave that company and move into the coaching arena?
So in 2001, I unexpectedly ended up out of the business. My former partner and I had a major disagreement, and we settled it by him buying me out. And the year before, my wife had sold her physiotherapy clinic. And someone smarter than me sat me down and said, your kids will never be 11, 9, and 5 again.
Absolutely.
And I had literally, if your listeners can imagine, the most cheesy, cartoonish light bulb, over my head moment. I had it sitting in the chair when this woman asked me that question. And from that, we decided to commission a sailboat in the south of France and take our 3 kids and homeschool them for 2 years while sailing more than 10,000 kilometers in the Mediterranean.
Wow. What an experience for you and the children.
Exactly. A lot of growth and change in that. And then I came back. I did 3 years of angel investing in startups, like working for options. I didn't realize how unfulfilling that was until I met an amazing coach in 2007, and I hired him. And then he helped me get back into a series of executive roles where I was principally a senior sales and marketing leader. But I was usually working directly with an entrepreneur friend of mine and helping behind the scenes with like the strategy and some of the bigger picture things. My last gig there was with a telematics company. That's a company that has devices you bolt to trucks and cars and tracks them in real time and then provides information to better use the fleets, the people. And that was a $35 million a year, 160 employee publicly traded company. But more importantly, the coach I hired, Coach Kevin, I built a trust relationship with him, and 18 months after we started working together, I told him my biggest secret, and that was that I had a challenge with drinking, and my challenge was actually that I was an alcoholic.
Right.
And he coached me to 12-step recovery, and I've now been sober for 15 and a half years, and that personally has been the single biggest transformation of my life.
Yeah.
But to get to the final piece, which I know it's a long answer, but I'm an old guy. And the coaching bit. So when I came out of WebTech Wireless, which was the telematics company, I realized that I had worked as hard in the previous 3 years as I probably had in any time in my career. And now I'm in like my mid 50s, and I decided I did not need to prove to anyone I could work hard. Mm-hmm. And so, I worked with Coach Kevin and decided to become an entrepreneurial coach and facilitator, largely to give back to entrepreneurs the gifts that Kevin had given to me. Yeah. And so I launched that practice 9 years ago. I launched a book, Win Your Sales, Vital Strategies that Accelerate Your Entrepreneurial Growth. And then about 4 years ago, I decided to become public about my recovery, and I specialize in helping entrepreneurs who are challenged by alcoholism or addiction.
Wow, no, I do appreciate that. That's really interesting. Thank you for that. And just
so there's just a few transformations in that 40 plus year journey.
Absolutely. Which leads me on to the next question, which is, how do you define transformation? Probably with what you've just said, there's 2 types of transformation. There's the personal transformation, but also then there's the organization business transformation. So we're more focused on the organizational side rather than the personal transformations, but it'd be useful just to get your perspective on that question.
So since you and I first talked, I've reflected on this question. I think it's a fantastic question. And I have the same answer for both personal and organizational, mm-hmm. which I believe transformation is a change in belief systems.
Right.
So it's a change in some belief, a belief that you have yourself for the personal transformation side, or it's a belief that an organization or the people in the organization have that needs to change in order to create the transformation. And those beliefs lead to behaviors personally, and those beliefs at the organizational level lead to organizational behavior. And I think you have to start with changing those belief systems to create change. Now, I did want to share with your listeners a really interesting corporate example, which is in process. It's not done yet. It's more applicable to our American listeners, but I think all of us can relate to it, which is Southwest Airlines has been in business for, I believe, 50 plus years. And they took a page of Jim Collins' book, which Jim talks about SMAC, which is specific, methodical, and consistent operations, and like really boiling it in. And Southwest is a master at this. And a big part of their branding and their SMAC is that they don't pre-assign seats.
Yeah.
And the management, the senior leadership at Southwest have decided, they've changed their belief around how they compete. And they believe they no longer can, in the current airline environment, without having premium seats and pre-assigned seats. So they have announced that they're going to do this. And there's already been a lot of that from clients. So, it's a lot of us in the leadership space are really watching, like, this is so transformative. Like, to take something that was core, was a founding principle of the airline 50 years ago, and to have the courage to make the decision, like, that things have fundamentally changed enough in the market that you need to make this change. And then, of course, there's tens of thousands of employees at Southwest, and hundreds of thousands of repeat customers. So this is in process. They've made the announcement. They haven't actually made the change yet. And this is one a lot of us in the leadership and coaching space are really watching with interest, because it's going to be really interesting to see how Southwest manages to do this, and what it's going to look like a year from now.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, actually, that you raised that example, and the fact that it is so new in terms of the announcement, because the first question that I would have, and the logical question back to you, I think, is the question that a lot of organizations should have when they're thinking about transformation. Why? What's the why behind that decision? And it'd be interesting to see how Southwestern communicate that why. And right. Because I think that's probably the first part of helping to change those beliefs within the customers, within the employees, ultimately the behaviors.
Yes. And to answer it more broadly, like, I do a lot of work around strategic planning. And, I work with, and I also coach, like, I only have high-performing clients as a general rule, right? Like, they're high-performing entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs, it's high-performing people in general, are all onto the next challenge. And they're often onto the next challenge and already, like, rolling up their sleeves and, like, figuring out how to go, like, solve this. And I often pause the conversation just the way you did, which is like, why? Or can we take this challenge and can we flip it over and see it as an opportunity? So rather than, like, solving the actual challenge, could we somehow operate the business in a different way that would give us new opportunities? And why would that be important? And I often ask that why. I focus more on why and what, and much less on how. Because I think, and also a lot of high performers, and I come from the high tech background, so we're engineers, right? We're computer scientists. So everything is about how. There is no other question. So it takes a lot to, like, remind, and I have some high tech entrepreneurs as clients, and I got to take them back to, why'd you start the business? Why is this important? What impact will this have to make this change? Whereas they're already 2/3 of the way down the road of actually implementing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that happens all the time, doesn't it? Someone gets an idea, they run with it, because they think it's a really good idea, but not really
Right.
with clarity around what it is that they're doing. But as you say, why is it important? What's the impact upon and everybody else? And is it being driven by the customer? Is it being driven by internal efficiency? All of that stuff, it almost gets ignored because actually I've got a really good idea and go with it. It's that sort of next shiny object syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah, or like I had a client yesterday, a very successful family business, and he has they're in the wholesale seafood business, and they have a certain number of mistakes. And he was, well, what do you think if I hire checkers and this and and finally, he was so kind of entrenched in solving the problem his way. I finally said, could you take the driver manager and the drivers and maybe a couple other like pickers, and could you just put them in a room and could you just facilitate a discussion around here's a problem and I want to see less of it, right? And don't offer any of your solutions. Like just listen. Because I said, first of all, they probably have better ideas than you,
Yeah.
because they're the ones who do it. So they're experiencing it every day. And even if they come up with your idea, they will implement it and buy into it way more when they feel it's their idea.
The ownership.
So yeah, and the ownership piece. And again, as leaders, we so often often we do have the experience that it is likely the best solution. But I think it's really important that we be open that we're wrong and that we go to the source. I think in organizations, it's probably one of the things most organizations could improve is going lower down in the organization to the people who actually have the interactions with customers, who actually build things, who actually move things around a warehouse. Like you can say, again, our goal is to be the top 20% most profitable business in our sector. And right now we're at 50%. So I'm challenging all of us to find a way to be more profitable. Because I'm the owner of the company and I want us to be more profitable. And that is an owner's prerogative. And as an employee, you don't necessarily get to agree or disagree with that. That is the owner's prerogative. But at least the owner's been clear, right, of what the goal is and what has to happen, and then is looking for individuals to come up with. And I did this at my time at Robel. We had a little flat turn one year, and I challenged the company to find $100,000 savings without laying anyone off in 1 year. And they hit and I offered no advice as to where you're going to find it. And they found $100,000 plus of savings.
9 times out of 10, I find that, if there's a problem within the organization, the people that are most likely to understand that problem and have a good idea of how to resolve it are those frontline staff that are dealing with it daily. And it's that upside down management, that belief that actually the most important people in the organization are the people that interface with your customers, and everybody else within the organization is there to support them and support the people that are supporting them. And as managing director, CEO, or whatever, you're there to support the people that are supporting the people that are supporting the people that are supporting the frontline people. And having that mindset and that mentality, it delivers significant added value, rather than the traditional "I'm the big cheese and you'll do as I say."
Yeah, and it's probably just nuance, but instead of support, I use the word. How do we make that individual successful in their role? So again, it's really about focusing on their success. How will they know that they're successful? Like I work in a framework by a guy, Vern Harnish. His books are The Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up. And he believes that really well-managed companies every person at the end of every day can say whether they had a good day or a bad day objectively, like because they hit a number. Like again, there's like you've figured it out. Now to actually figure this out in an organization is really hard, but is well worth it.
Yeah. But I think the challenge is we're going, coming into sort of back into the sort of general change and transformation world is giving people and helping people to get clarity around their role and the way that they will get measured and giving them
right.
that, in allowing them to understand what that means as they go through whatever change you're trying to get through. But one of the challenges I think a lot of transformation leaders or consultants who are working in this space, and I was talking to someone this morning, the easy option for a consultant who's working with a firm or an organization or someone that's leading the transformation is to see an issue, talk about that issue, and then take ownership of that issue and come back with, this is what we should be doing. The real skill is to identify that issue, engage the people to take ownership of that issue or that problem, and facilitate that discussion so that they come, as you're just saying, so that they come up with a solution and then help them and support them to put that solution in place. Because, as you just said, they've got ownership of it, they believe in it, and the change management piece will be so much easier. But it's a mindset change for a lot of people who are working in this sort of consulting stroke change and transformation world.
And again, I'll go back to my opening about what transformation is to me is about changing belief systems. So first of all, you have to change the leadership belief, which is I have the answers and I'll tell you how to do it. But then there's the broader, in order to get buy-in and to work with people. Well, like for example, if you're going to go to people and ask them for their advice, well, first of all, you need to actually take it and implement something. Like you never can implement all employees' ideas. If you can do 5 or 10%, you're probably doing pretty well. But if you don't do any, then people are like, well, why should we give you feedback? Because you're not going to listen. Which again, gets back to belief systems about a leader. Like you have to actually believe, you have to have a behavior that's consistent with listening and taking what you're being told. But you also may have to work pretty hard on the belief systems in the organization. Like you hear a lot of we've always done it this way, which then gets back to your opening question of you got to be very clear on why. That's true. We've always done it this way. And our goal now, like in Southwest Airlines, our goal is to become more competitive against our competitors. And we've identified that this is what customers want. And so, yes, we've always done it that way, and we need to do it differently in the future if we're going to survive as an airline. Right? And so again, it's working with people's belief systems and showing them that the current belief system is not going to work going forward. And what the new system needs to be.
Absolutely. We talk about within the transformation world, and I talk about the transformation canvas, and one element of the 9 pillars within the canvas is the business model. And the key question when you're looking around the business model is how do you deliver value to your clients or your customers? And all too often, coming back to the point about the next shiny thing, you come in with an idea that can actually start to detract very quickly the value that you're delivering to your customers, but they think it's a good thing to do. Yeah.
Right.
Almost you've got to step back and say, okay, look at these 9 areas and where is it going to have an impact of any negative impact on any of these areas? Or do we need to make some adjustments in these areas to allow that to happen at the optimum? So it's quite interesting that Southwest have come out and said, actually, we're driving this change because it's being demanded by our customers. And if we're going to survive as an airline, we've got to adapt and we've got to change. So that, they
yes.
understand that value that the customer is driving towards.
And I would say Southwest, more than most airlines, truly understood a lot of its value. And it also understood how it could deliver very low cost tickets. Like it fundamentally built structures. Like, for example, their average turnaround time on the ground is lower than almost all other airlines.
Yeah.
Like, so it's baked into their smack. Like, and that's one of the pushbacks. It's going to take longer to load the plane. So they'll have to figure that out. Yeah, and in the current environment, I'd say the biggest shiny red ball that we keep hearing about is artificial, right? And it's the latest, greatest new thing on the block. And yeah, and will it cause transformation for some industries and businesses? Absolutely. And does everybody need to look at it right away? Probably not. If you're a big enough organization, you probably need a senior leader that's looking at its potential, especially as what would happen if your competitors took it up in a big way, and would it give them competitive advantage? But again, like the values question to me, because I do a lot of work around strategic marketing and looking where people fit in their market space. So to me, you have to get the intersection of the market problem you're trying to solve, the competitive space. So you can't like operate in a vacuum and pretend like there's no competitors.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you really, really good at? Because I think your sweet spot is the intersection, that Venn diagram intersection of what the market pain is, what your competitors are doing, and what you're really good at, especially that you're good at that your competitors aren't. That's your sweet spot, and that's where value can have. The other way I describe it to entrepreneurs and their teams is, the bigger the headache and the better your pain pill, the more value you deliver. And you often deliver value in places you don't like, you may not be paying attention to. One of the examples that's in my book is we have a local security company, and like it turns out that the security industry has really a dirty secret they don't tell us about, which is when an alarm goes off, nothing happens. Mm-hmm. Like what happens is in some call center somewhere, probably thousands of miles or kilometers from where you are, like, something goes off in someone's console and they call you. Hello, Mr. Greer, your alarm is going off. Right? And I might be halfway around the world at that time. So it's not really that useful to get a phone call. So Mike Yeager founded his company on the brand promise, 5 minutes to your door or your money back. And then he built a system to actually show up at your door if an alarm goes off. And is one of the very few people in that whole industry which actually does something when an alarm goes off. And so, for people who really appreciate that, there's huge value in that. Not everybody cares about that, but the ones that do tend to care a lot and are willing to pay a high premium to get that level of service. So there again, you have a whole industry and where the belief, the whole action of the industry changes what value you deliver.
Absolutely, great example. And as I say, going back to Southwest Airlines, they were one of the, I think maybe the first low cost airline that really created a whole industry globally.
Yes.
For many years, I'm not too sure whether they still are, but for many years they were the most profitable airline, weren't they, globally? It was like, well, we're delivering the best ticket prices, but actually we're creating the biggest profit. It was almost, how could that possibly be? It's counterintuitive, but because they were getting the fundamentals, they kept the cost down, and they did the turnaround.
Yes.
People coming through, and there's in Europe, there's so many airlines that copied their and what they did and what the European airlines have done is got people flying that never flew before because it was so.
Yes.
And there's a story a good few years ago. So one of the European copycats is a company called Ryanair, and the chief Ryanair is a guy. Oh, his name's just gone completely out of my head. Anyway, the chief exec is a bit larger than life character. Early days, he was all about creating media coverage for saying silly things and doing silly things and just being plain devil's advocate in lots of things. Michael Ryan, that's his name. And there's a story that one of the in the UK, one of the centres was at Luton, one of the sort of hubs at Luton Airport, just north of London. And he was flying out of Luton one day, and this old guy grabbed hold of him and said, "Look, my flight's been cancelled at the last moment. I'm sick to death of it. This is happening, and I'm going across to Ireland to see my daughter with my new grandchild, and your company screwed my plans up." And really, really quite aggressive. And Michael Ryan sort of came back and said, "Okay, so I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what's happened, but all I can do is apologise. But let me just step back and say, what are you flying to Ireland for now?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to see my daughter." "Oh, okay. And how often do you go and see your daughter?" "Oh, 4, 5, 6 times a year." "All right, okay. And what gives you how have you managed to get there 4, 5, 6 times a year?" "Oh, well, because it's cheaper now on Ryanair than it's ever been before." And he turned the thing around really easily by demonstrating the core values of, in that case, what Ryanair was all about, and how it opened up a whole new market for them to get to and from point-to-point transfer.
Little unknown sidebar note is that the software that was used to create the whole back end for Southwest Airlines in the early days was on the computing platform that my company, Robel, specialized in. And one of the products that I was chief architect of was at the core of their batch processing, and many of the other copycat airlines, including WestJet here in Canada and EasyJet in the UK, were also customers of ours.
Oh,
So there's a little. Anyways, it's a long time ago, but it was a pretty fundamental piece of their back end infrastructure.
Yeah. Again, I love these sort of these stories where some relatively small element of innovation completely radically changes a whole sector, and that's what that did, didn't it?
It did.
Ability to have differential pricing policies based upon the amount of purchases made, and understanding how to optimize the revenue per flight, just completely changed the whole industry.
And on the cost side, they specialized in the Boeing 737. And they made a commitment early on to only buy one kind of airplane, and then only have stock of one kind of spare parts, and have mechanics that only needed to know how to fix one kind of airplane.
Yeah.
Like, again, it was, and sometimes these transformation choices you can see in hindsight, but you don't realize how radical they are. Like, they were completely different than what was being done at the time.
Yeah. But
right?
When you look back at in hindsight on that, it's obvious, isn't it? Yeah.
But it always is. But the problem is, it's not obvious looking forward. It's only obvious when you look backwards.
Yeah. But there's so many lessons that people can learn from that approach of saying, let's standardize, let's stay with just, let's ensure that everybody understands that, and let's move forward, as opposed to going in and lots of different directions all at the same time. That power of one.
Well, and
so important.
Again, like Mike Yeager and like an industry secret or an industry practice. Like again, it's about belief systems. Like, oh, everyone in the industry does it this way. Well, and then what happens if you are willing to actually challenge that? And maybe you don't get anywhere. Maybe there's lots of good reasons why it's that way, but maybe there's a new path forward that really challenges the way it's being done in that industry. And you can be a transformative like player in a marketplace by doing things fundamentally different than they've always been done in that sector, right? Although again, it takes a lot of courage. The easy route is always just to do it like others, right? And so I want to remind your listeners, like if you're in the middle of any kind of transformation or you're leading a transformative change, there's a lot of it takes personal courage to change your belief. Like my getting sober required me to radically look at my belief systems and, what got me to that point. And I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and organizations to fundamentally change, as I say, you have to face the brutal facts, right? And oftentimes we are not willing to face the brutal facts. Like they're there, but in my experience, 50% of the battle is recognizing the brutal fact.
Absolutely. And
right? Like it's half the battle. So, and almost anyone, you can figure a way forward once you've admitted, what the brutal, like for me personally, the brutal fact was that I was a daily drinker for 20 years and I was an alcoholic. And that was the absolute brutal fact. I was in denial for 20 years. And at one point I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I couldn't live in that denial anymore. And I had to face up to that brutal fact about myself.
I think interestingly enough, isn't it? If you translate that into the organizational context, we talk a lot within change and transformation that change and transformation is much easier when you've got a cliff edge, or you've got
yeah. Yeah.
To some extent, what I found is that even if you haven't got a burning platform or a cliff edge, if you create one, by making some absolute commitment that actually this cannot continue in the way that you obviously did, came to the conclusion that actually I can't continue to have a drink every day. If you create one burning platform within an organization, that's just as effective as if the burning platform was real. If you can create one and get people understanding, because it drives that why. Coming back to what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And senior leaders have to stake the course about the artificial one they created. Like that's the other place where that breaks down.
Totally agree.
Right? Because and you have to have generally some kind of consequence to not achieving it.
No, absolutely. And again, just I suppose bringing it back to the business side and using a silly analogy, but I've got involved in the past with lots and lots of technology implementations, and the thing that you've got to ensure for success within any technology implementation is that you stop people from reverting back to where they were previously and what they used to do previously. Right. Some people say, "Oh, well, they won't have that system. We switch that system off." But what they forget is that they used to take a load of data dumps and put it into Excel, and you're still giving them the dumping data out of your new system into Excel, so they continue to do it. And it's right. So just said, just turn off that switch to say that they can export into Excel, because people like doing what they've always done. They don't like change.
Well, and it is a lot of, if you have built a lot of business process around having that Excel spreadsheet and the data that it gives you and the insights that it gives you, like in a new system, and if you turn off that ability to download to Excel, like you still need that information. And it can be quite painful to figure out how to use the new system to give you, that information that you needed. However, we still have the same core problems as once you take it out of the system and put it in an Excel spreadsheet. It's not up to date. No one else can see it. No one else can see the decisions that you're making because of the data that you've got. And so again, some of it is helping educate people that it's not just about you, that this system is intended to provide insight and efficiencies to a whole segment of the organization. And if you don't buy in and help us keep it within the system, then we lose all of that benefit that we're counting on.
Absolutely. So going back to the start, you're saying that you think it's very much about belief changing and changing the behaviours off the back of that changing belief. So taking that and sort of bringing the discussion to a close, in your experience, what's the one thing that people need to do or have in place to enable that sort of belief change to happen, and then ultimately the behavior change to happen?
Well, I reflected on that question too. I maybe phrase it just slightly different, but I think it's the personal belief. Like, I always underestimate my ability to change and transform. Like, and there's always that very significant resistance at the start because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to someone this morning about James Clear and his book Atomic Habits, that talks about, like, if you make a 1% or even a half of 1% change every day, but you stay the course for a year or 2 years or 5 years, you will create unbelievable change. And my belief is we are all capable of this change. And so don't underestimate yourself and your organization and the ability to change. And if you need to, just get on the 1% path.
Yeah.
I mean, often transformative change takes more than that, but if that's what it takes to get started and to get going, then do it. So anyways, that's my takeaway that I'd like listeners to have is, are you underestimating your ability to change and transform yourself? And are you underestimating the ability of the organization to change its belief systems and its behaviors, and what it's truly capable of?
Great example. And that sort of marginal gains, that 1% improvement day in, day out. There's in the UK, there's a guy called Sir Dave Brailsford, who was the chief coach for UK cycling, British cycling,
Mm-hmm.
and then went into Sky Cycling, and we went from winning nothing in cycling to being winning gold after gold after gold in the Olympics, and Sky going from a brand new team to winning, I think, 3 or 4 Tour de France on consecutive years, and mm-hmm. on this marginal gain. It was, if I can improve every element by 1%, the cumulative effect of that is massive. And I'm hoping he has exactly the same impact, because they've just come in and be part of the football team that I support, Manchester United. Winning in winning things as opposed to coming 8th in the league. But with that, thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure and a really interesting conversation. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's really great to be here today.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. We're always interested in hearing from you. What do you find useful from this pod? What would you want us to explore more in the future? Please do press the subscribe button. It helps us to reach more people and share the experiences of all my guests. And remember to check out my book, Transformation Leaders Body of Knowledge. See the link in the show notes. See you soon.